Welcome to the Deal Champs podcast. I'm your co-host, Mr. Strat Daddy, aka Mr. Stratton Brown. We have Captain America and the Master of Hair is back with the hair flowing today, Mr. Jason Pritchard. Today we're going to cover how to build a seven-figure real estate portfolio. This will be a little bit more free flow and all of the things that we've used in order to build a real estate portfolio, because that's what everybody gets into it for, is to buy rentals. But they don't realize at the beginning you got to make some money first before you start buying rentals. A little bit about us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is Stratton. I own a seven-figure real estate portfolio, single-family creative houses and storage facilities, and we've built that, the majority of it, within like a 3-year span, which is pretty fast. And we have two different companies. One of them is virtual assistants. The other one's our storage stuff. If you need any virtual assistants, go to virtualhelp.io. Now, we have Mr. Captain America. Are you on the beach, Captain America?
The beach is right there, actually.
Captain America from the beach with the Ray-Bans, Mr. Dean Rogers.
What's up, guys? Dean Rogers, your other co-host here. My story is I transitioned from the NFL to corporate to then real estate. Been investing in real estate the past decade in Central California. Done over 600 plus deals. Rental portfolio almost 10 million, and coaching students with the wholesaling playbook. You guys can always connect with me at deanrogers.com.
And then we have the master of hair, hairline still in place, Mr. Jason Pritchard.
42 years old, hairline still looking good, boys. What do you think?
The
about
master
that?
of
Thank you guys
reverse aging. The master of reverse aging.
Thank you guys for holding it down last week. I am your third co-host, Jason Pritchard. Left corporate America in 2014, burned the boats, went all in real estate. Since then, we flipped 400 houses. I bought my first rental in 2016, bought my 50th rental in 2019, and a couple years later, we got to 100 rental properties. So, our goal with this podcast is to transfer all the things that we've learned, all of our experience, the good, the bad, to all of you guys listening and watching. Today is, like Strat said, going to be a free-flowing conversation, so we'd love to get some activity in the chat, make ourselves available to answer any questions, and talk about everybody's favorite topic and why lots of people get into real estate, building their real estate portfolio. So it should be a good one today.
So I will start us off. I do not believe you should start by buying rentals unless you are making a good amount of income at your job and you can afford for $30,000 in a turnover. $30,000 to $50,000. I don't think you should start. I think you should probably flip a house first. That way you get used to contractors and everything else, get to build your cash reserves. Michael Zuber's awesome, and he says go buy him one rental at a time. But I think for the normal person who does not have a ton of money laying around, it could mean financial disaster. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts.
I think we're all probably in agreement with that one. I feel like we all kind of started our business models similar way, finding deals, getting good at acquiring, negotiating, and getting properties at a really good discount. And for me, that's the prerequisite to mitigating a lot of the risk that you're going to get, especially once you get rental properties. You've got to be in a space where you can learn how to make money first from finding deals, build up a little bit of a war chest, stack some cash, and then get into a space, like you said, where you've got a little bit of a safety net there. So in case something goes wrong, because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. When something goes wrong, You're not freaking out because you've got all your money tied up in one or two properties. So definitely build the acquisitions arm of your business first, get great at finding deals, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, I think for the average person that isn't making a ton of money at a W-2 job, you need to make money first before you start trying to hold on to properties. You build wealth through acquiring and holding on to the assets. There's no doubting that. But undoubtedly, we all have mentioned it a little bit here or there. You're going to have stuff that comes up, and you have to have enough money to weather that storm and get through that problem. All it takes is an AC to go out to wipe out your cash flow for the entire year and years to come. All it takes is for a tenant to move out and for them to trash the place. And now you're coming out of pocket $15,000, $20,000, $25,000. That's a big chunk of money. And if you're not used to being around that type of money, making that type of money each month, or having that stashed away for a rainy day fund, then you could get totally sideswiped. And now you've got a property that's a problem for you. And now you're the type of person that's going to sell that property to one of us, right?
Yes.
That is constantly looking for deals. And those are the type of tired landlords, tenant problem properties that we constantly are buying. And so, no doubt, Jason, you said it, Stratton, you said it, finding deals is the first skill set I believe you should focus on. Now, you might be listening to this too and have a high income earning W-2 job, and you don't want to get to work. You don't want to hustle. You don't want to find deals. You don't want to negotiate with sellers. If that doesn't appeal to you and you're making enough money to where you can drop in $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 as a down payment each property, then you can find those properties on the MLS and make them pencil. But for the average person, you got to get the skill sets of finding deals, turning those into cash so that you can end up holding on to them.
Do you think it's like $250 a year is what someone should probably be making in order to, like, if you're making $250 a year in California, maybe a little bit more, you're probably safe enough to go buy one if you don't live a very good lifestyle. It's like the thing that like goes in my head as I start doing math.
Yeah, if it depends on your lifestyle and where you are buying those properties, for us being from Central California, if you're making $250 a year, you're living a modest lifestyle, living below your means, you could pull it off. You could buy a property a year. Absolutely. Me living down in San Diego, I mean, that's just like hardly, that's not even covering my yearly expenses just to, just to live. So that's, it's a different story, but it depends on where you're at.
What were you going to say, Jason?
It depends on, it's just isn't like how much you make is one thing, but how much you spend is another thing. I mean, I know plenty of people that make $250 a year and spend $300 a year, and they're just upside down. So it's like, I know other people that make less than 100 and sock away 30, 40 grand a year just because they're frugal and they're very smart with their personal finances. So I think it's not just about how much money you make, it's about how much money you keep, and you need to get your personal financial house in order before you think about going and scaling up a real estate portfolio. Just to drive home, okay? I want to drive home the point that we were just talking about. I want everybody to understand what the last 45 days for me as a rental owner, as a landlord has been, because it's been a roller coaster for me. So we had an eviction that I posted about where we had bought a long-term rental property. We inherited the tenant. We ended up having to do eviction. It was a mess. It's on my Instagram. You can see the story and see the condition that they left in it. We're spending $75,000 to remodel that place. That's just coming out of my pocket cash. Okay. We're replacing a roof next week on one of our rentals. That's $11,000. So what's that math? $86,000 there. We just did an eviction off a duplex that we own in a small town called Kalinga, and the electrical panel needs to be swapped out. That's $8,000. So right there is, I don't even know how much money that is, $95,000. And I had a $35,000 occupancy tax bill to the city of Fresno for Airbnbs that we have too. So I'm writing checks for $120,000 over the last 45 days just from the stuff that we own from our rental portfolio and our short-term rentals. So it is definitely not all sunshine and rainbows when you own rental properties like we do.
When I tell people all the time, and I'm like, Jason doesn't pay himself a lot from his portfolio and he owns 100 houses. Like, to put this into perspective for you, Jason has one of the bigger real estate portfolios I know, and I don't think he could retire off of his portfolio.
No, we pay ourselves from our active income from the flipping and the wholesaling and the brokerage business. That's where we support our lifestyle, because not that you can't create like an income stream that will pay you consistently and predictably, but all of us have debt on all of our houses, right? So when you're really going to get a significant amount of cash flow is when you've paid your mortgage down. And then if you get to the space where all those things are free and clear, or the bulk of them are free and clear, you go from making $300 to $500 a month in net positive cash flow to $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month, depending on how much rent you're collecting for each one of those properties, right? And now you are sitting in a much different position. But in order for all of us to scale as fast as we've had, you have to leverage debt in order to do that. And when you've got debt on your properties, even if on paper, on your spreadsheet, you're making some cash flow, that can go away very, very quickly.
Let's talk about the calculations of cash flow. And there's guru math to where someone says, I bought it at this, the monthly mortgage payment is this, and I can rent it out at X. That's X amount of dollars in cash flow. To in all reality, if you buy it for $1,000, you can rent it out at $2,000. Let's say to be safe, you could get $500 to $300 in cash flow a month off of that thing, because you still want to stash the rest for nonsense. Is what I like. You never know what's going to happen. Real estate is probably one of the most unpredictable businesses out there.
Yeah, I think everybody likes to go with just looking at what their debt service and their holding costs are. So it's their principal, interest, taxes, insurance, PITI is what everybody refers it to. So I think a lot of new investors just say, here's what I'm going to generate in monthly rents. Here's my mortgage payment, my property taxes, and my insurance. I subtract that number and we have $300 to $500 left over. And they're not accounting for, even if you do like a full BRRRR where you fix everything, you're not accounting for vacancies. You're not accounting for maintenance. You're not accounting for capital expense. You're not accounting for legal fees. You're not accounting for all of these big other ancillary costs that are there that can sometimes be, I don't know, 30 to 40% of the expenses that you carry when you add all of that stuff up. So a true number would be having a percentage assigned to every one of those categories: your vacancies, your maintenance, your big capital expenditures, legal fees, property management, if you have management. And then you'd be even better shape if you're having $300 to $500 in cash flow left there. And I made that mistake at the beginning too, honestly, because I was just so excited about accumulating rentals. I just was happy to see $400 positive on the spreadsheet. And I thought that's how it was going to be the whole time. And it just wasn't.
You went hard.
Yeah.
For when I was working with Alan, Jason was the number one buyer for like a year because he set a goal. He's like, I'm going to get to X amount of rentals.
That's it. Over my dead body. That was my goal. That was it. And I think that's good. And that type of grind and energy serves a purpose. And so I think when you're driven that way, I think it works. But then, you end up buying properties that don't make sense to keep as rentals. You end up forcing things that would have been better off as flips. And I think that's the thing for you guys that are watching on this live stream and that end up listening to the podcast later. We're trying to help you guys not learn, from the same mistakes that we made. And I get it. And I think we all understand what it is to set a target for the number of units and to say, hey, I want to have X amount of units, but it shouldn't be like you shouldn't be forcing deals that shouldn't be rentals. And I'm sure all of us have forced some deals at some points, and we just ended up regretting it later on. So you want to learn from our mistakes and not make the same ones if possible.
Dino, and I don't think any of us use property management companies. Do you think that they should manage it themselves at the beginning, or do you think they should hire a property manager?
I think Jason's going to have a different answer than me. They self-manage everything. For me, and I believe there's value to managing it yourself from the experience you get, the understanding of what it's like to work with tenants, getting probably your numbers a little bit more dialed in and some more control over the expenses that happen as a result of having tenants. But for me, I initially bought rentals and have my business set up from the get-go to work for me in the lifestyle that I want to have. I sit at my home in my underwear and play with my kids. That's the joke, but not joke that I say all the time. But literally, like, I work in my underwear most of the time, and I don't want to go look at properties. I don't want to be dealing with tenants, doing all that kind of stuff. So from the get-go, we've had stuff managed by a property manager, and that can be a make or break thing for your business. A property manager can make it so that you can sleep comfortably, that it's not a problem for you, or it can make it an absolute nightmare for you and just be draining all of your cash. Now, will I say that I could make a couple hundred, maybe even a couple thousand, I don't know, more a month as a result of self-managing it, being tighter on the numbers, being tighter on how we work with tenants, what we approve as expenses or not, letting the tenants know, no, that was you, that wasn't us, that's something you take care of, that kind of stuff? Potentially, yes. But I can tell you my bandwidth of me thinking about it, the effort that I put into it, I put zero effort into the rentals. All I'm approving is expenses. Like we've been saying, there's expenses that will come up whether you self-manage them or not. And at this point, it's just me approving or not approving or problem solving on the things that come up, those expenses that we weren't anticipating is what I do now. But aside from that, the rentals take care of themselves. I don't touch it. I don't think about it. And I personally like that. It works for me. So I think there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah. I'd say there isn't a right or wrong answer to this question. I think at the beginning, when you're starting, I do see a lot of inherent value when you've got one or two of them, and just understanding for yourself what the process is to market a rental, to screen tenants, to take tenant applications and gather all those documents, show the proper, do all of those things. I think there is some inherent value there. And then maybe you get to a space where if it starts to grow quickly, then you can hand that off to management. We just made the decision that we were going to self-manage very early on. I was committed to that very early on. But like Dean said, I mean, it's not when you self-manage, you've got another job, that's for sure. And so I've been fortunate that we've hired out teams and built some systems and processes around how we manage our rentals, so it doesn't suck up a lot of my bandwidth. And so now I'm only really involved when things are like really problematic, if we've got to make a decision about an eviction, or if it's just above an expense approval is above one of my team members' pay grades, I've got to look at it and make a judgment call there. But it took a long time for us to get into that space. And so I think you just got to pick what's right for you. I don't think that there's right or wrong either way.
We self-manage everything and we don't have a massive portfolio, but I think it's been huge just to be able to call out the bullshit. Because you can go with like bad property managers and like the Matt Larson story that all three of us assholes puckered about when he came on, being able to like spot some stuff if someone's stealing money from you or anything else like that, I think is huge. So like for those first couple, just knowing where to spot inefficiencies, because rental properties don't have a lot of room for, like a lot of margin, in my opinion. Like, cause like one expense, bro, and you're out 5 years. And so I think you should be able to spot out whatever you need to and be like, no, that's way too much. We know what this costs. And then eventually when you're like, okay, you know what? I want to outsource it. I'm done with it. Then you can do it. But then anybody I know who's bigger does it themselves, because at a point they're like, hey, I got to take all this money in-house anyways. We're going to care more about them. They're more efficient. And eventually they just bring it all in-house, and that could go for like T Sums. I know he has a massive portfolio. He does it all himself, and a couple other dudes.
If you start going at scale and you look at, I mean, on average, and a safe number is to say you're going to pay 10% of whatever your gross rents are for property management, right? So when you're only collecting, $5-6 grand a month in gross rents, and you've got a couple properties, it's a little bit of an easier pill to swallow. But if you start collecting $300,000 a month in gross rents, and you're paying $30,000 a month, and that's $360,000 a year, you start thinking it's like, well, that $360,000 a year that I'm paying for management when I'm operating that size of portfolio, I could hire internally probably 2 like solid people that are seasoned, trained property management people in person, a really good VA, and pay for all the software tools, and maybe even a maintenance person that runs full time. And then I keep that cost a little bit more controlled. And as it scales, my property management expense doesn't scale, right? So I can grow my portfolio up. I keep somewhat of a fixed cost for my property management fees, because now I brought that in-house, and that's more of a static number. It's not growing with the portfolio. Every time I add a unit, the number goes up. So I think if your goal is to grow, it goes back to the point that I was saying at the beginning. It's good to know and understand, because it's not as easy for you to get caught off guard or scammed by people. If you don't know what you're doing and you just hand everything over, you're going to be very susceptible to be taken advantage of. And then as things really grow, I think for us, that was the big reason why we decided to keep it in-house, is we can control our management costs by keeping it in-house a little bit more.
I think all property management companies are not created equal. There's some that are significantly better than others. Yeah. I think the industry itself kind of has a bad rap, because I think a lot of those companies end up getting lazy and not taking proper care of the properties. So I think some of it is luck of the draw. Like if you just happen to have a killer property management company in your area, you might just consider yourself lucky, you know. I know for myself, where we hold most of our properties, my business partner had a relationship with a property management company that was just easy for us to walk into, and we feel confident on the way that they run and operate things. Again, can I just say that they're perfect and they do no wrong? We couldn't save money otherwise. No, I'd probably be a fool to say that, but um, it really matters about having the right company. So if there's anything when it comes to the rental properties, just like vetting a contractor, just like vetting any other person that you would work with on a project, you have to vet your property management company very, very thoroughly. Because if you choose the wrong one, they've got you in some handcuffs and they can really mess things up for you.
And I'll transition to this. What do you guys think about investing out of state? I'll give you guys an example. Me and Kalani went to like South Bend when everybody in Fresno was going to go into South Bend and buy rentals. So we went out there. I couldn't find a good property manager. The person who Scott and Jason referred me, she didn't pick up her phone. I was all right, we can't use her. We couldn't find any other ones. And then I was like, if we are going to go out here, we need to buy 15 at a time in order to make sense with the plane tickets, just cash flow wise, or else it automatically doesn't make any money.
And and then out of state stuff is difficult. We still own stuff out of state, and that is managed by a property management company. So we don't self-manage everything. We've got 6 units in Ohio and 1 still left in Indiana. And that's the hardest part, man, because we got screwed on our property management and our stuff in Cleveland, and we lost a ton of money in the first 18 months. And then we finally found somebody that's been really good since then and that we're really happy with. And it's hard going back to vetting a property management company. It's difficult because like the property management is a very difficult business to run and operate because the tenants don't want to hear from you. The tenants are pissed. The landlords don't want to hear from you because every time you're calling the landlords, it's to spend more money. So like the reviews that you're getting from both of the people that you're servicing are usually bad. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, you can't really just go on Google or Yelp or whatever and look somebody up. Cause I'd be skeptical of somebody that has like glowing reviews because it's just hard, man. And so I think you really have to if you're going to buy in any market, you've got to find people that own properties that can give you a referral for a solid property management company. That would be my best way to vet somebody. Go and get somebody, a referral from somebody that you like and trust, because it's not easy, man.
Now, do you invest anything out of state? Do you know?
Nope. I've been tempted and teased and continue to think about it, continue to do some high-level research on what other markets might be good. The one that has my attention right now that my partner and I are looking at is Tennessee. And we're thinking in terms of buying multifamily, maybe some single family, but more so we want to buy units if we're going to go out of state. Assuming that, cap rates are higher, which then you assume are getting more of cash flow. So that's what we're considering and looking at right now. But I feel like, at least for me, when I'm in the groove of things, I don't want to try to go reinvent the wheel and try to be an expert somewhere else. I kind of like just being the expert where I'm the expert at this point in my career, and continuing to just double and triple down on what I'm good at. And instead of trying to be the expert in some other market where someone else is already the expert, who probably is getting the handshake referral deals, and I'm cleaning up the mess and getting the bad deals, is kind of what comes to my mind. So I want to be really careful about it. Again, I get attracted by the low price points, thinking about picking up a house for $50,000 that's going to cash flow $750, or rent for $750, $800, $900, that kind of stuff. I hear stories like that and I'm like, dang, that would be nice. But does it come with a big mess I got to deal with too? I don't know.
I agree 100% with what Dean said. I think there is an inherent competitive advantage of being an expert in your market, and not just being an expert, but also like being the go-to for the deals that come through, because you're just going to get the very best deals, whether you're generating them yourself or people are bringing them to you because of prior relationships. That will insulate so much of the risk that you're going to get in rentals, because you're buying the asset, or you should be buying the asset at just a much deeper discount. So even if you've got to stomach a significant repair, 10, 20 grand or whatever the number is, right? You should have bought deep enough to be able to offset that. And it's just hard to recreate that in a brand new market where you're just another fish in a big pond that nobody knows. It's very hard to recreate that really high quality deal flow when you bounce from market to market to market, in my opinion. So the shiny object thing, I think, gets a lot of people. It's gotten us in different ways. We've talked about that openly on the podcast about different things that we do. And the more I see myself drifting to new things, the more I have to remind myself that this is what I'm good at. I'm good at this market. This is where I've been proven to have a successful track record. Let's just stick with what works. Let's not try to keep reinventing the wheel. So that's the stage that I'm at right now too.
On that topic, do you guys think it makes sense at any point in time, based on where we are at, what we have done, to move on to multifamily?
I mean, I'd only do storage if you think about it, and it's like
yeah, for you. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. What about you, Jason?
Multifamily to me feels tough. Like if you want to get into bigger deals, the deal flow on those things and the type of competition you have when you're like dealing with like institutional money, if you do not have like those broker relationships, bro, you're not looking at good shit. And that's like big enough to where you can go buy it and it makes sense financially. It's in a good area. I'm happy with it. Because like, let's say some institutional fund comes in and buys it, bro. They'll pay it at a 4 cap. They don't care.
Yeah.
They're getting money for the pension funds.
I'm thinking best case scenario. I'm thinking we find our stuff off market, direct to seller, tire landlord, distressed property. We're getting a sweetheart deal. Are you guys interested in getting into multifamily and looking at it? Or are you just saying, hey, single family is what I started with, it's what I'm good at, I'm gonna stay here?
We look at small multifamily. I think that there's, in our market, Dean, there's probably a tipping point where the small mom and pop investor owner, right, where that we're marketing to, I think where that shifts to kind of what Strat is saying. I don't know what that number is, but we picked up a 6-unit deal. We've got an 8-unit. We've got a 12-unit. We're working on this motel conversion. That'll be 26. I think somewhere in that sweet spot, I think, yes, it does. I think once you get to, I don't know what the number is, 40, 50 plus,
it's like 40 and 50.
It starts, the type of competition starts to change. And I think you're playing a little bit of a different ball game where, like for us, at least for me, I'm always looking for value add projects that I can buy at a deep discount. I'm not looking for a vehicle to park a big chunk of money. You know what I'm saying? And so are there deals to be had there? Yes, of course there are deals to be had there. And I think the short answer to your question is yes, I think it does make sense to continue to grow and progress and start picking up bigger, larger assets. I think, I think it's a double-edged sword, man, because I think just like we were talking about the shiny object syndrome and getting distracted, doing other things, having to build new relationships, as soon as you start past that tipping point that we're talking about, and you got to know the brokers and you've got to syndicate the deal, and you can't just go raise it all from private money, and the debt for properties like that, the debt structure changes, the amortization table is a lot of things that change there. So you're playing a little bit different. So you've just got to be careful when you're doing that. I feel like for me, if we can recreate a business that always brings us the deals that we're getting now, and it's not sucking up a lot of my time and energy and bandwidth right now, I don't know why I would want to turn that off. You know what I'm saying? Like if we can do it and set it up in a way where I can focus on doing larger things while the team can still keep picking up these things that are our bread and butter deals right now, I don't foresee myself going away from that anytime soon. While we're learning to do the other stuff, I think that's probably my goal.
Looking back, we should have kept the wholesaling company in-house completely and let it do exactly what Jason said, instead of like partnering up with people, let it keep making money. Because like in all reality, the big multifamily stuff, even if you do syndicate, it's not making you money for 5 years. Like you're not really going to get a ton of cash flow in the middle of it. Like, yeah, you can take a management fee, construction fees, and Mitch can come on and talk about all this and how he makes money beginning, middle, and end. But man, I think I'm looking at bigger stuff. Like me and Kyle looked at like a 91 unit portfolio that came from Mitch up in Sacramento. But it has to be at a point to where it can sustain a property manager and it's big enough for like a team member or team members to be there to handle the whole thing. Because if it's not, bro, it's already a big enough distraction when you're dealing with it. Now I'm using other people's money, so we have to be great with it. If it's my money, I can take a loss. I don't want to take a loss in other people's money. And then the time suck of it, of revamping it, all the relationships and everything else, like the storage stuff, it's a massive learning curve. You're still going to have different types of learning curves and everything else that are going to take you, in all reality, like it's going to take you a year to get comfortable. Nobody just like hops in like, yeah, I've done single family, I'll get multifamily. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. But I mean, we looked at a 93 unit here in town, right down the street from City College. That wasn't even listed. It was a bankruptcy sale that was off market. And we walked it, and our number was like 4.1 or 4.2 million on it. And it's going to go for like 6.5 is what it looks like right now. So, I mean, like, I mean, we're $2 million off, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like we're 30% off of like the highest price. And so it's just a different, I think a different end game for the people that are buying that property than what we would need to do it. Cause we got to buy it at a number where you can raise the money, fix everything. And even then we're probably going to have to share some equity with who we're borrowing the money from, because
100%.
Raising that much money from, one person, probably not going to happen. Right. So then now you're raising money from multiple people. You're going to have to keep them in the deal, give them a piece of the back end. Then you're managing 93 units here. And I mean, it's a whole nother animal, dude. So it's like, you have to be careful when you make that big of a jump up.
And I think it starts to change too when you're making a ton of money, to where syndication makes sense, because your business gives you the best return, right? So your wholesaling and flipping company gives you a better return than any of your rentals ever do. And you still need to look at it that way when you're like investing. I have this money here, I can put it into our marketing or hire on another great person, or I can go buy a rental if it gets locked up. And then you look at it that way, and then you kind of maneuver it that way. And if you don't want to be on it, Josh and Tiff, I know, don't really buy rentals. They make a god-awful amount of money, and they invest it all into syndications. And I think Nick Perry's the same way too. Nick just invests it all into syndications. His company prints off cash. And so he sticks with what he's good at. He knows he can invest more money back into that company to grow it. He'll probably get a 40% return. And then anything of excess, he'll throw into syndications for the tax benefits.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that model. The thing that I don't like is that I don't have control over when we can exit the asset. And I've talked about this with you guys over the last year. We sold 5 or 6 properties. We sold 5 rentals last year. And it was like our ones that had very high equity, but were problematic, that were just kind of the dogs of our rental portfolio, when we freed up $500,000. And so for me, even though real estate's not a liquid asset, we made a decision kind of early on in the year, because we saw how the market had been affected by rates, that we wanted to increase our liquidity. And over the course of 6 months, I was able to make a decision. And you don't have that control when you're going on a ride with somebody else's deal, right? And so I think that there really isn't, bro. Like there's so many different ways that you can slice this up and carve it up. It really does kind of depend on the person. So you got to be careful with it.
Let's talk about return on equity. And this kind of gets like a little bit farther ahead. Dean doesn't like having a ton of debt. I think your debt ratio is the lowest. Mine's probably the highest, and Jason's is the middle, because my stuff I've been at like 10% down, right? And I'll overpay because they're owner financed. And then, or we've bought in some no equity deals, creative finance wise. Are you looking at your equity and be like, hey, if I just sell this, I can go put it to work somewhere else and get a better return? Like Jason said, this is more of a question for Dino.
It's a tough thing. It depends on, I don't know what the right answer is, honestly, when it comes to more debt, less debt. My loan to value, my debt is in the 60s. So I know some people have less. Some people are, and I say in the 60s without even having updated my spreadsheet with what the values are. The values are greater, so it could
Probably
be
a little bit
low
lower. Yeah.
60s. It might even
Yeah.
be in the high 50s. I don't know. But yeah, I'd actually say it's probably in the mid 50s, low 60s. So that being said, could I have leveraged more debt and had more tax-free money available to then reinvest, buy more properties, do whatever I wanted? Sure, I could have. But when I looked at my personal goals of wanting to try to keep my monthly cost, my monthly mortgages, my monthly overhead at a minimum, so that over time it would compound my returns. Because my goals, whether this changes over time or not, is to keep these things until the California falls off the map and Arizona's the new beachfront property. Like, I plan on keeping these things forever, and I've got most of them at 3.5% to 4% debt interest rate. So to me, I don't want to go refinance them at any certain point in time. So I want to keep that debt as low as possible and have my payments be low, so that over time, as it compounds, the rents go up, my cash flow increases and becomes more faster. And that to pay it off happens a little faster, because as the cash flow increases and all that starts to happen, I'd imagine there being a point where there's enough equity to where it might make sense to just pay some of these suckers off. So that was my mindset behind it, but I don't know if it's the right one or the wrong one. So
it's another thing that depends a lot, man. I think if you're in Dean's situation, I've got a lot of very low interest rate debt too, and we're probably not going to see interest rates for investor loans like in the 3s or even 4s anytime soon, if ever. So that's 100% that type of debt is an asset. And I think unless you absolutely have to, I would not think about selling it. Your question, Strat, is like, how do you unlock that equity, right? And reinvest it to kind of grow.
Are you looking at it, right? So like, hey, I got a ton of equity in this thing.
I do. Because it's like, okay, you have all this equity. So here's something that you could do, right? So you can, I mean, I get lots of promotional offers, and I'm seeing more and more where different companies, credit unions, local banks, and online lenders are offering home equity lines of credit on non-owner occupied properties. So let's say you're in a position like Dean or myself, where we've got a bunch of rentals locked in on 30-year debt at 3.5%, 4%. We don't want to sell those, but we've got, similar to Dean, I'd say I refied all of my stuff at 70, 75% when I was doing it. I was pulling max leverage, but when you account for appreciation, I haven't really refinanced anything in a couple of years. So when you account for how much I've appreciated, my LTV is probably somewhere in the mid 60s right now. So I've got a significant chunk of equity sitting there. So I think about this a lot. If we've got $4 million worth of equity just kind of sitting in the sideline, how would I unlock that without disturbing the loan that's in first position, right? And I think you either do that through a second position loan with a private money lender, something short term where you borrow against equity that you have with somebody that you know, like, and trust. They say, hey, here's a performing asset. I've had a long-term tenant in here. I've got a ton of equity in it. We've got a long-term working relationship. I've got a deal that I need 150 grand for. I want to put you in second position against my rental. I'm going to go flip this house really quick, come back. I'll pay you off when it's done. And then you could do that, or you could pull a HELOC out. I know there's a number of different online lenders that have HELOCs where you could pull a HELOC out in second position. You have that money there available for you when the deal comes. And I think where people screw up with HELOCs is, I don't think it makes sense, at least in my opinion, to pull a HELOC out on any property and then tie it up into something long-term. I've only ever used my HELOC for things that I can get in and out of very quickly. And I can borrow that money at 6 or 7% or whatever the interest rate is on my HELOC. I can take that, double it, come back, pay my HELOC off. And then I just recreated, a big rip of 50, 60, 70 grand off of a flip or something like that. And just do that over and over again. So I think that's probably the way if I wanted to have my cake and eat it too, keep my cheap debt in place, but also unlock the equity, I would do something like that.
Does debt
like
freak
that.
you guys out?
No.
Would you be signing on a bunch of recourse debt if you decided to go into multifamily? That's when it starts to get kind of freaky, because now they're like, hey, if you're going to go take on this $15 million deal, awesome, but I want half of your portfolio as collateral.
It's tough if I'm not the person that's the operator and the one that's controlling the deal. Then I'd probably have a little bit more pause there. We put up everything, dude. Like if I'm the one and I'm betting on myself, like I don't, we've talked openly about some of the larger deals where I've had to put up my primary. I'd have to put up a big chunk of my rental portfolio to get stuff done. So if I'm the one that's doing it and I trust the deal and I believe in myself, then that's one thing. But if I'm signing on as like a sponsor or the person that's putting up my credit and then somebody else is running the deal, then that's where you got to be really, and you see a lot of people right now that are either getting capital calls or they're just getting wiped out completely. You know what I mean? Because, they just either signed on to a bad deal or signed on with a bad operator. So you got to be careful when you're doing it and you're not controlling the deal.
I think your question about am I scared of debt? I think the answer is no, because I have confidence in what I'm investing in. I think where I've gotten nervous before about the thought of taking on debt for a certain type of project is when it's something I'm unfamiliar with, something I haven't done before. And all of the properties that I own as rentals, and we've talked about this over and over again, were deals that were just so darn good that you couldn't literally screw them up. You couldn't mess them up. If the tenants needed to be evicted and it took them 14 months, like one of my rental properties, I didn't even think about it once. It was just a thing that we talked about on our weekly meeting that needed to be fixed, and what could we do to try to expedite it. But I didn't worry about it at all because I knew we bought it at such a good price. It was something I had done over and over again before. So having private money in short-term debt on that property and then refinancing it once it became vacant and we fixed it up, it was just part of the bread and butter that we're used to doing. So am I scared of debt? No. And it's just comes back to what are you most familiar with and confident with? And I think that's key. If you're doing a bunch of different things, you're trying a lot of different asset classes, different types of properties, that's where I think you put yourself at risk, because you're just dealing with constant new information, new things that you're having to come up against that you haven't experienced. And that's where you can get surprises you're not prepared for. I can't think of a potential surprise I haven't dealt with on a rental property. There's only, so many that you can get. And unfortunately, most of them are just financial. Someone messed up a property or something, damage happened to it, and you got to take care of it. And in the position to take care of that, like we talked at the beginning. So, I'm not concerned about any of it.
The reason I ask, you could say that, but then these multifamily operators who did sign up for stuff and insurance rates have gone through the roof. You were very, very confident and comfortable, but you're fucked. There's like some dudes who are going to lose a very substantial portfolio that they signed on with recourse debt in an asset class they knew, in a deal they thought was good at a good interest rate. And now essentially it is all going to zero. The investor money is at zero and they have to start over. And then I think of whoever the dude was who wrote the books before Robert Kiyosaki. I went to a writing conference with Henry Washington. He wrote a bunch of these books, and he had a $500 million portfolio that he had essentially signed a recourse loan debt on, and he got it all taken away from him. When in like the 80s, when the 80s like hit the fan. So that's why I ask, like, how cognizant are you of these things as you're trying to take stuff on? Recourse debt, no matter what, would freak me out. I'd always want to go for non-recourse debt no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, at least in the stuff that I've been buying, a non-recourse isn't really an option. I mean, you're going to have to personally guarantee like the stuff that all the loans that I have, I've had to personally guarantee them. So what makes me an additional thing that makes me feel good about some of the assets that we're all kind of buying, or at least me and Dean are buying, is it's fixed interest rates. So it's not like with commercial properties and commercial loans, you are a little bit more susceptible to what's going on in the market. And 3, 5, 7 years, that can go by really, really quickly. And look at all the people that, thought that they had it made 3 years ago, dude. You know what I mean? When it was like, and now 3 short years later, dude, it's like, it's all bad, man. And so like that type of stuff, I think are the things that, nightmares are made out of, and you've got to be really careful. But like everything that I have is 30-year fix. And even right now, the loan products on some of the smaller commercial properties are changing. And we're doing a 6-unit refinance on a building that we paid $497 for a year and a half ago, just appraised for $850. We've got about $100,000 into it. And that's 30-year fixed rate debt. So they offer a 30-year fixed rate on some of these smaller apartment complexes. So I think that's kind of the sweet spot for me, at least in our market, where we can grow into and we can still leverage stuff that's fixed over a long period of time, still find good deals from mom and pop sellers, that type of stuff. I think that's kind of where I'm headed.
I've got another more advanced question for us. Interest only loans. And Jason, you're the one, when we were at Fuel, I think, together, and one of the guys was like, bro, I'm only using interest only loans on anything I'm buying for rentals right now. And it was the guy in Colorado who's a killer. And he was like, I don't plan on holding them for more than 7 years anyways. And so right now we're looking at a deal that's 10 years interest only. I'm buying it at 80%. And I know over that 10-year span, I'll only get debt pay down after year 7, essentially. And I'm like, I'm buying a good deal. The numbers work. I'm very confident in being able to get out of it no matter what anyways. I think I'll just take it because it's at like a 5% interest rate. That all pencils, like it marks all those boxes for me. And then, so what are you guys thinking with like interest only loans? Are you doing any of them? I think they could be strong depending on like what you choose as an extra strategy. Dean's already shaking his head no.
For me, depends on what kind of game you want to play. Are you buying these as chess pieces that you're going to be using to lever up and try to time the market and time your ability to trade these assets up, or you're trying to time the market on interest rates? It could be a part of the game you're playing. I remember when it was 2021, the market was going crazy all over the nation. I remember talking with this one mortgage broker out of LA. Sounded like he had tons of money, was making hand over fist, and was investing in Houston, Texas. And he was telling me he was doing these interest-only loans. He was doing these 3-year adjustable rate mortgage loans, all of these crazy different type of things to max out cash flow at the time. And it was all part of his game to refinance later. To me, that scared the living heck out of me, because I'm thinking to myself, from day one of me buying this, I don't want to be worrying about the debt. I don't want to be worrying about having to play some game or time something up or find some other source of capital to support this asset. I want to lock it in from day one, set it and forget it. And that's what the 30-year fixed loan is. Anything other than that, interest-only loans, the adjustable rate mortgage loans, the loans that you can only get for commercial properties, where it's a 10-year fixed loan and over 20-year, 25-year amortization, and you better be ready in 5 years or 10 years to refinance it. Those concern me, because you have to be prepared. And look at right now, we just talked, you just brought it up, Stratton. If you ran your numbers based on 4%, 5% interest, and it's now double at 8% interest, those numbers look dramatically different. And if you're talking about bigger numbers, especially, that's extra scary. So you got to, at that point, if you get caught, you either got to sell it, hope you have equity, you got to refinance and come in with money down. That's just a capital game that I don't want to play. I want to protect my capital in the bank so that I'm ready for any rainy day. I want to be able to protect the assets that I have to where I don't have to sell them. I can let time do its work. Let time be my best friend to where it's going to pay it down. It's going to appreciate. It's going to give me the best appreciation. I don't want to play around with any of that stuff. So for some people, that might be the game that they want to play and intentionally playing. I'm using my rentals as long-term wealth, and I want to set it up from the get-go to be successful and not touch it from there.
And let's repeat this real quick, everybody. Balloons are for clowns. is a very, very good statement that I go by. I don't do anything less than 10 years. I'm very confident in 10 years. If 5 years go by, I can start to see what's going on and then start to move the pieces as long as you bought it right. Right. But I'm okay with the 10-year balloon. Anything less than that, I think it gets scary because you are, as soon as you close, you're thinking about the debt and what's going to happen next.
We've got two rentals, two that I can think of right now off the top of my head, that it was an interesting loan product that was available at that time. We refinanced kind of as things were already starting to creep up, and it was a 40-year loan. First 10 years was interest only, and then it converted into a 30-year fixed loan after that. And so we did 2 or 3 properties that are here in our home market that I'm very familiar with, that I feel like I have some expertise and some insider information knowledge about how to kind of maneuver and handle these types of properties. And those were ones where we made a decision to do the interest only, just to make the cash flow on the front end a little bit more, a little healthier. And on, I think they have a 5-year prepayment penalty. So we've got 5 years basically where we keep it there. And then in years 5 to 10, it will stay interest only. And then we can make a decision if we want to refinance, if we want to exit from that asset and sell it. But I agree. Overall, 97% of the stuff that I own is on 30-year long-term fixed rate debt.
Before you ask your question, Dean, is that hydrogen water that you're drinking?
You know it.
That's where that monthly expenses, that's where that's going, is that hydrogen water.
You know what? It's a one-time expense, so it's already paid for. I amortized it over the next 30 years. So it's costing me a penny a sip. So I got one question. Before I get to my one question, I want to pull up this question from the audience, from the listeners. So, advice for a person who inherits $500K and wants to cash flow in real estate. I love this question. You can pick any dollar amount you want, 500K, $1 million, 5 million, 10 million. I've played this game with myself to think, like, what would I do? What would I buy? I'd be curious to get your guys' answers. For me, it depends on the amount. This question is for 500K, so we'll play that game. I think it ultimately depends on what you want. Do you want to be actively involved, or is it just purely cash flow? Let's just assume, for all of us to answer this, it's just purely cash flow. We're not going to have any active role. It's just I'm going to buy this asset and it's going to do its thing for cash flow. So thanks for asking this question. For me, if I had 500K and it was an inheritance, I had no other skill sets to find my own properties, I'm likely going to look for, a property that I can buy and use that 500K as 20% down. Now, if I'm smart and I listen to the advice just that we talked about on this podcast, I need to save for a rainy day. There's likely going to be some expenses. Is that 50K that you set aside, 100K you set aside? I would set aside maybe at least 50, because I'm telling you right now, whatever asset you buy and use 450K down as a down payment, you'd want to be careful about some expenses you weren't ready for. And assuming you don't have any other
you need to have expenses 100K on that thing if you're going to drop that
100K. Yeah. See, I was trying to get more to put down, but dude, yeah, realistically, you're probably right. You probably got to have 100K. So let's say you got 400K.
Amount.
You can go buy, what is that? 400K divided by 0.2. Is that a $2 million asset you can go buy? Am I doing math right? Whatever the correct math is, I would use that as a down payment to go buy a several $1 million property and ideally, obviously, that cash flows as a result as you put in that down payment. I'd be talking to brokers. I would look at loopnet.com. I would look on the MLS, see what multifamily there is, small multifamily. But I would be looking for not just one house, two houses, three houses. I'd probably be looking for some small multifamily that I can park my cash there and put it to work.
I've got a whole thing. Go ahead, Jake.
This is a good question. So I would do a few different things. If I had 500 grand, I'll address the 500K specifically. And let's assume you're in our home market, Central California. I think you can do a little bit of damage with $500,000 out here. So I think you can set aside a chunk of that money. Let's call it 150 grand and buy a turnkey rental property that should pencil out. You're not going to make a ton of money on that, but at least it kind of gets you in the game, gets you familiar with owning and acquiring a property, managing it, potentially doing something like that. I think you do need to have some reserve. So you need to set aside 50 to 100. And the money that's left, here's what I would consider if you really want cash flow. Let's say you've got 150 into the property and then 100K in savings. That leaves you 250 left over. I would consider lending money to a proven operator, right? If you want cash flow at 10% on a $250,000 loan, you're going to get $2,100, $2,200 a month, right? And just pure interest. If you're lending that money out at 10%, possibly even charge some points up front. So you could do that, right? So you can make some of the most passive money that you can make is via private lending, right? Do something short term to somebody that's going to fix and flip a property. So you've got to have some trust there with somebody that's there. And I would add the caveat that you want to learn and understand and know more about the business, right? So you want to learn a little bit, you want to maybe shadow, you want to follow along, you want to do some of that stuff. And I think a lot of times, if you want to do that in exchange for funding somebody else's deal, you can kind of learn the business a little bit and see if you really want to be involved in a day-to-day, because I think real estate investing inherently is very sexy. Lots of people want to get involved in it. And then when they see like what's actually involved in the day-to-day of like finding off-market properties, negotiating these things, locking them up, like how much work and effort is involved. You may want to take the balance of that money after you get paid off and buy another rental and just keep doing that. But I think at least exposing yourself to that experience is good. And you can get that experience potentially and get a really solid return that will pay you some money and then go from there. If you don't want to do any work, you don't want to flip, you don't want to do anything, lend the whole 500K out. You make $4,500 a month and it'll be the easiest $4,500 you make as long as you're working with somebody that's got a proven track record.
Yeah.
I'll just add to that real quick because Stratton, I know you said you got something loaded up. I want to reiterate back to a point I didn't make. It depends on what you want, right? Are you looking for maximum cash flow? Because to Jason's point, if you lend that money, most experienced investors are going to give you a double digit, usually 10% annualized return. That's significant. I can tell you right now that most rentals that you're going to go try to find are not going to pencil out to that, right? So you can get a high cash flow on your money and return on your money lending it out. If you want to maximize your tax savings, potential appreciation over time, and maybe suffer some of the cash flow up front, then that's where owning some of the real estate might be your best bet. So just wanted to add that back on there.
Mine was, what are your goals is the first thing I wrote down. Like, do you want to go full-time into real estate or do you just want to have passive income? And like, what is your monthly number? Because that'll dictate what road you want to go down. I have syndications, number one, as like another semi-passive one to kind of diversify. I, like Jason thinks, if you just want cash flow, everybody wants to be the bank, and lending that money out at 10% in 2 points over and over and over again is going to be great passive income for you. And then my other thing was skills. Like, do we actually like want to get into this? Do we want to go, okay, you know what? I want to jump all in. I'm going to go pay for a program, and then I'm going to find someone in that group. I'm going to invest my money with the best operator there, learn everything, and then I'm actually in the game, right? Depending on where you want to go. If you're older, you just want cash flow, that's one thing. If you're like, hey, I would love to become a full-fledged real estate investor, I think joining a program that goes over commercial and you can bring a substantial amount of money to the table and you leave $100 grand for yourself. The rest of it, you're going to go and do it. And you're like, hey, I'm going all in and you're a younger person. I think that is what's going to give you the best return on that money, because you'll get a return on that money. And then all those skills you get, you're going to keep buying more and more and more deals. But again, it's what are your goals? We have many, many different roads we can go down. Do we have any other questions, guys? Oh, Dino, you have your question, right?
Yeah, we could end with this last question here. And to me, I think this is a really important one that kind of wraps up everything that we're talking about, which is, when is the right time to buy your first investment property? Does it matter on your experience? Does it matter about the amount of cash that's in your bank, amount of deals that you've maybe done before that? What are your guys' thoughts? When is the right time to buy your first rental property?
The answer, my personal experience, is everything that I've done that's been worth a damn, I started before I was ready. And I feel like I would be giving not truthful advice if I didn't say that, right? And so I do think you need to do some things to mitigate your risks. I do think that you need to have some cash. I do think you need to learn from some of the mistakes that we've talked very openly about here on this episode, and apply those towards your life. But if you're waiting for the perfect time, you're always going to be a bystander observing the game. You're never going to be in the game, man. You know what I mean? And so I feel like, you don't want to be reckless, but you can't wait until everything's perfect, because that is never going to happen. So, that wasn't the answer to your question, Dean, and it probably makes it more confusing for some of the people that are listening here. But I always started before I was ready and figured it out as I went. I'm the type of person that responds very well to that type of pressure, and I rise to the occasion. I think all of us are like that. But I think if you are a little bit more reserved and you don't necessarily operate well under those type of circumstances, then get a little bit more prepared. You know what I mean? Set aside, as Strat said, $30,000 to $50,000 in our market is a decent nest egg. There isn't anything that's going to come up that's really going to cost more than that, in my opinion. You know what I mean? A roof is going to be 10, 12 grand. An AC is 8 to 10 grand. A sewer line, 6 grand. Like they very rarely do all those things kind of happen at once. So if you've got a typical rental in Fresno, California, you've got 30 grand stacked up and you've got that there, I think, you can learn the rest as you go. I think just having enough cash reserve so you don't totally screw yourself financially, I think, is an important one.
Jeez. I mean, I bought my first rental way before I was ready, I guess. And because we had like 20 grand in the bank, and we bought a house that had like negative equity, but I brought in a money partner for it who was prepared. There is no good answer to this, because I want you to mitigate your risks to avoid the headaches and like sleepless nights that I had. But in all reality, if you're in the game, you're inherently an intuitive person who's going to figure it out regardless. Right.
And the difference between all of us from most people is that we had somewhat established real estate businesses before we ever started buying our rentals. So
that's very true.
Let's say worst case scenario, like you got to go spend 15 grand on a rental because of whatever happens, right? You have to evict a tenant and then you got to go turn the whole unit over again or whatever. I could just go do another deal, right? And so if you're in a situation where you're working a corporate job and you don't necessarily have the ability to go generate a quick rip or a quick pop of income from doing a deal or doing this or that or whatever, then you really probably do need to have a little bit of a nest egg before I would say start, right? But if you're already active in the business and you're an active flipper, active wholesaler, an agent that has big chunks of money, you've got your personal financial house in order, you're not spending more than you make, and you can go make money by doing a deal really quick, then I think that's what kind of is different from us than the person that's maybe working just a regular job. And, if they lose 30 grand, that's their entire savings. So, it really does depend on the person.
Yeah. If you work a regular job, don't listen to me. We've all been in like a sales background, I would say, for a very, very long period of time. And so we think about money differently. We don't see it as like a monthly thing, but more as like a lever to pull. If you work a 9-to-5 job, get 30K in the bank. If you don't have an ability to get 30K in the bank at your 9-to-5 job, I'd tell you to start wholesaling or like get into the business or get some type of side hustle that's going to bring in the money. if you're in the business, I do think if you're in the business, you know what you're doing. Creative finance is a great way to get into it. And that's probably what I would do to like mitigate the most amount of risk. But if you're working a regular 9 to 5, get 30, 40K in the bank. If you're in the business, creative financing is a great option. And then you can just go do 1 or 2 deals if anything goes south. And then I would tell you, partner up with someone and give them all the equity. And you just want to be a part of it just so you can learn if you're really scared. And that's what I've done with a lot of things. So that way I feel confident in the process and I have someone whose hand I can hold and gain confidence. I think that's all of us have someone who's held our hand and mentored us throughout all this time, to where, I mean, me and Jason had Alan, and I've had other people to where I could call someone if something went wrong and get all of my problems solved in a very, very quick phone call, to where if you don't have that, have more cash.
I think that's a really good point that none of us really talked about until right now. Having a trusted person that can be a mentor, coach, whatever you want to call it, dude, that it's been there, done that you can go to and act as a second set of eyes or act as a safety net just to make sure you're totally not screwing yourself over and doing something crazy. I think I made so many decisions because I just trusted Alan so much. So when I ran something by him, I was like, bro, what do you think about this? And he was like, do it. And I was like, all right, I'm doing it. You know what I'm saying? And that confidence like literally supplemented my lack of confidence that I had because I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, well, damn it. If he's telling me to do it, then I'm going to do it, dude. You know what I'm saying? Or if he says it's safe, then I feel like, you know, I'll figure it out as we go. So I think having something like that, having a person like that in your corner, I think is really important.
Or even a community that you're a part of. So something like that. What about you, Dino?
Yeah, you guys made so many good points. Just to try to pick out the ones that stood out to me, you've got to have a rainy day fund. So it's not a question of necessarily are you ready for it. It's just, are you prepared for it so that if something goes wrong, that's part of it. The other thing is that I just remembered I wanted to make sure to mention is, even if you are ready, it doesn't mean that the opportunity is going to be there. Okay. So when the opportunity is there, you should take action on it. That's a combination of what we've all kind of said. Jason made the point, you're never really going to be ready. Look, when I started buying my first rentals, it was me pivoting out of only being a flipping business with small margins to back to the bread and butter of wholesaling, being an expert at finding deals, prioritizing cash into the business that stays in the business. That's when I started buying rentals. I was not cash heavy. I did not have a bunch of money saved, but it was the fact that the opportunities were sitting there right in front of me that made sense and penciled. And because I had the experience of connecting with the private money lender, with having the experience of getting those rent ready, having the relationship with the property manager, because I had the right pieces in place, I was able to take action on those, not because I was necessarily financially prepared. So it really depends on what skills you're working with. If you have no skills or experience, then you definitely want to have a little bit heavier of savings. And the advice that was brought up at the end there about being a part of a community, having a coach or mentor, having a business partner that you partner with on these deals, any of those combinations are going to accelerate your results significantly, going to help mitigate your risk. I know every time my business partner and I look at a rental property, I borrow his confidence and he borrows mine. And if we're both nodding our heads and agreeing, yes, it makes sense, we both have zero doubts in the deal. And could things come up that we weren't prepared for? Sure. That's with anything. But those are the deals that I have the confidence in because I know my business partner thinks it's good. I've looked at it. He validates that. And now my confidence is through the roof. Now I know we should move forward with it. So I think borrowing someone else's confidence, experience, knowledge is a game changer.
Bro, yeah. I have to hammer do that, because I'm telling you, without Ian Horowitz, I would have not had any confidence to buy any storage facilities. right? Without being able to call Ian or be able to call Alan when I'm looking at something, or one of you guys, I would not have taken the leap, because you don't want to fuck it off in any other type of way, especially if you're getting other people's money involved. And so get some type of mentor, friend, or something, because that borrowed confidence is enormous, and it'll just change the way you act about the whole thing too. Instead of being jittery, you're like, no, I got this. And that goes a long way, just as far as like with the universe, and we can get all woo-woo with it, but I promise you, it'll make your life better. Do we have any other takeaways?
No, this was
Not
a
for
fire
me.
episode, bro. This was good.
This was
I
good.
thought this was a good episode.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good episode. All right, guys. Do not forget about the Deal Champ Summit, April 19th and 20th. I should have talked about this at the beginning. God damn it. We are having the best investors from across the country who are going to talk about stuff like this, growing a wholesaling company, raising money. We have such a stacked lineup that we're so excited to hear from. I can't wait for it. Go to dealchamps.com/summit to get your tickets. And then do not forget to hit like and subscribe if you're on the podcast app. And then go give us a follow on social media if you guys aren't already. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will talk to you guys soon. Peace.